June 6, 1944. The Allied landing in France, which the Germans had been waiting for so long, had begun. Over the past 78 years, much has been written about why the Allied invasion was successful. But what we are going to analyze in this program is what the German army would have had to do to have rejected the Allied forces, and what consequences this would have had for the development of the war. The German leader himself commented at the end of 1943 that the expected Allied attack in the West would be the one that would decide the war. If they were able to repulse it, they could employ in Russia the almost 60 divisions they had in the northwestern theater, and thereby completely stabilize the situation. This would throw off the Western Allies for a few years, which they would need to relaunch another invasion attempt, and thus finish getting all German industry up and running. In addition, this extra time would be used to have a greater number of the most advanced models of aircraft, tanks, and weapons in general, which they were developing. Finally, and although by way of speculation, if the Allies failed to open a second front in France, it was possible that their alliance with the Soviets would be undermined. In short, and by way of conclusion, rejecting the Great Allied landing was vital. Although it is obvious, the analysis that we are going to do next is based on knowing the final result of the operation, and taking into account a lot of information that the German side did not have. Even so, it will help us understand what the most important elements of the defensive operation were, and how they could be improved. With that said, let's start at the beginning. The most important point to be able to repel an enemy attack is none other than knowing the exact place where it is going to take place. Looking at the map of the European theater, and specifically if we look at the entire defensive perimeter that covers the Atlantic coast, we quickly see that it is immense. However, the options for the Allies were not as many as it may seem. In the first place, it was clear that the most obvious point was in Calais, since it was the shortest route, and in addition, the Allied fighters that did not have a very long range could obtain a greater superiority there. However, as it was the point where the Germans most expected the landing to take place, it was soon ruled out. What was done, as you know, was to create a fictitious army under Patton's orders, which fueled the idea that the main attack would take place there. This was further reinforced by double agents like Garbo, who confirmed this suspicion. Incredible as it may seem, part of the German High Command would continue to think, until July, that the attack in Normandy was a hoax, and that the main one would come through Calais. With this option ruled out, all eyes turned to the Cotentin Peninsula, Normandy, and Brittany. The first of these three to be eliminated was Brittany, as it was too far away for Allied fighters to operate from England. With regard to the Cotentin Peninsula, which was crowned by the port of Cherbourg, although it offered good beaches without cliffs, it was a bottleneck that the Germans could defend without too much difficulty. Also ruled out areas such as Denmark, Norway, or the French coast near Nantes or Bordeaux due to its remoteness. Normandy was the best option they had. It would finally be there where they would penetrate France, and they would advance rapidly towards Paris, putting the entire German army in retreat, forcing them to establish a defensive line already in their original territory. With all the ports of France under his control, and after the landing of millions of soldiers, and millions of tons of material, it would only be a matter of time before Germany fell. Due to the situation of total vulnerability, in which the troops find themselves while carrying out a landing operation, in which they hardly have heavy equipment, taking the Germans off guard was of vital importance. On the other hand, for the Germans it was more than necessary to know where they would attack, since they also knew that the first 48 hours would decide the outcome of the battle. As you all know, Eisenhower himself wrote a statement in which he apologized for having failed in the landing, even before it took place. This is because he, more than anyone, knew how difficult it was going to be for the Overlord operation to go well, because the variables were infinite. One of them that would be tormenting him until the end was whether the Germans had found out about his operation, and if they had discovered it. Undoubtedly, Eisenhower's worst nightmare, as well as that of all Allied commanders, was that the Germans were waiting for them. Had this been the case, there is no doubt that the invasion would have failed. With this, the best forecasts of the German High Command would have come true, and the war would have lasted at least 1 year. However, luckily for the Allies, they were able to catch the Germans quite off guard, and they did not react quickly or forcefully. In short, the German Navy flotillas in the area had estimated the day before that the sea was very rough and that it was impossible for any invasion to be attempted on those days, so they did not intervene on the day of the landing. The Luftwaffe, which was another element that the Allies feared, since an intense attack by German aviation just at the moment of landing would have been very damaging, did not intervene either. This was due to the fact that it was very battered, as a result of all the attacks on the place that the Allies had been carrying out in the previous months, and that most of the fighters were being used to defend the German skies. Based on all these factors, their presence was minimal during the Allied landing. And finally, let's go to the land army, this being the most important. First of all, both Rommel and important commanders were out of the place at the time of the invasion. He was either visiting his wives in Germany, at private parties in Paris, or playing war games in remote locations in Normandy. This added to the complex internal functioning of the German High Command, in which the army generals were given less and less independence, meant that they did not react adequately. In addition, and as we mentioned at the beginning, due to the Allied intelligence successes, when it came to camouflaging their operation, and making the Germans believe that it was going to take place elsewhere, it meant that the Germans did not divert a significant number of troops to Normandy, believing it was a diversionary attack. Again, and although much is said about how good the Soviets were when it came to hiding their intentions, catching the Germans by surprise again and again, what the Western Allies did in Normandy had a greater merit, or at least similar, as to completely confuse the Germans. Once all the planned beaches were taken within a few hours of the landing, along with several kilometers inland, with the great Allied air superiority, and the support of the warships as powerful artillery, it was only a matter of time that the Allies ended up winning the war of attrition that followed. In addition, the collapse of the Eastern Front with the Bagration operation, just a few weeks after the Normandy landings, made it practically impossible to allocate significant reinforcements to the area. In my opinion, it was this and no other, the most important element for which the Allied invasion in Normandy was successful, although of course, in the end it was the sum of all. And well, this video ends here. Thank you all very much, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.